Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Open Education Week panel of Colorado students. Today we have our host, Brian Healy, who I will turn it over to, and then all our panelists will introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Healy. I am at Metropolitan State University as a lecturer in communication studies. I'm also the advisor for our student OER club, and I'm really happy to be here today with you all. And so I would like to go ahead and we're going to go with, I think, Caterina. You can go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll move around the circle.
Hi, I'm Caterina Azzarello. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Northern Colorado in educational psychology. I also work with the textbook affordability librarian as her assistant, so I'm heavily involved in OER creation work and have taken many OER classes, as well as teach an OER class.
Sorry. Hello, everybody. My name is Haylee Carrillo. I'm a Young Invincibles alumna, and I'm a Bachelor of Arts student in Sociology and Criminology at Colorado State University.
Right? And then we'll go to Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate, and I go to Colorado Mountain College, and I work as an online student studying anthropology.
Nice to meet you, Kate. And then Mallory.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mallory. I am a communication studies student at Metropolitan State University, and I'm also vice president of the OER Club.
And then Sebastian.
Hello, my name is Sebastian. I'm currently a sophomore business student, finishing my academic associate's degree at Colorado Northwestern Community College. And a couple of extracurricular activities I've done here at this college would be I'm an RA, I'm playing on the boys soccer team, and I am also a PTK member and officer there.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to go through a couple different questions, and I don't really have a particular order in which I'd like you to go. So, as we would say in performance, whenever the spirit moves you, I'd love to hear your answers. The first question we're going to talk about today is the first experiences that you've all had with OER. So we're really interested in finding out what the first class or the first space that you used or utilized OER, and when you did, what were your initial thoughts? I'll do the teacherly thing. Why don't we go to Caterina since you were first this time, and we'll kind of move the order around.
Sure. I think the first time I took an OER class was actually in my master's program. So throughout my undergrad, I always had to pay for a textbook, but definitely in my master's at UNC, I took a few OER courses, and it was really nice to not have to pay for a textbook. And it was nice to have those materials like readily available day one and not have to really worry about anything else.
Awesome, that's great. Yeah, Haley.
Yeah, so the first time I had experienced OER was actually my first semester, my first year. It was my Spanish 101 and my Sociology 101 courses. I was confused as to like what an OER is. I was an out-of-state student, so I was really unfamiliar with OERs, but I thought it was cool. I was kind of excited, and I'm happy that I've had it so far up to this point. I'd been told much of my childhood that textbook costs would prevent me from accessing higher education. And it was a relief to learn that that was not the case at CSU Pueblo, and that they understood this obstacle and created OERs for us for our education.
That's great. That's great. It's a great story, and it's great to see the transition and shift. How about Kate? What was your experience?
Well, I transitioned from in-person school in Hawaii to Colorado Mountain College online, and so I didn't realize that my first anthropology class was one of these types of classes because it just so seamlessly fit with the online learning. You know, I didn't have to find the book, I didn't have to get it shipped to me, which can be complicated. I didn't have to ship it back. And so that was really nice and made that class feel a lot more seamless and not confusing.
That's great. That transition. That's awesome. Mallory?
Yeah, my first experience with open educational resources was actually in a communication studies class at MSU. And my first reaction was honestly relief that I was able to use that money somewhere else and that I had access to the textbook on the first day. And I was really excited about it, so much so that I was like, how do I find more classes with no cost textbooks? And it led me to more communications related classes and has led me to a communication studies degree. So it's pretty cool.
It's great to see that we're working towards that Z degree. All right, Sebastian, how about you? What was your first experience?
So, I am from Utah, so I had never heard about OER. So at first, I was honestly a little bit skeptical. I wonder if it would be like lower quality, but once we got into it, I realized it was just as good, and I actually liked that I had access from day one without worrying about paying for it. And that kind of immediately changed my mind about OER and kind of made me more interested to do a little bit more research about it, how it worked, and how it all came together.
That's really great to see that kind of jump, right? Like everybody from the jump, especially when we are going, from that online learning system, especially, COVID, post-COVID, to be one of those kind of galvanizing forces behind why we want to use it. You kind of have talked about this, but we're kind of really interested in what are the aspects that you're finding that are the things that you kind of really like love about it. Why are you still kind of supporting that the move towards it and with us today? So, and in that question, kind of, what do you find to be the most engaging parts of OER? When you're using them in your courses or utilizing them in other spaces. And we'll mix it up a little bit. I'll go with Kate first this time, and I'll just kind of bounce around if that's all right.
Sounds good. Well, I found the OER really helpful with like I have a lot of learning disabilities and navigating all the different textbooks and the pages and sometimes really slows down my education. And so having the book available day one or the material already attached into the module courses was really helpful and allowing me to navigate where I was going and what was most important. And it also has because it's online, it has tools that help me listen to it while I'm like driving in the car, so that can kind of help save me time. Or I can still highlight in some of my books and write notes. And I can also do Control F, which I find extremely helpful because sometimes you read something and you're like, where was that? And then you can Control F it and find it, and it's a lot easier than like hunting through the pages of chapters of books, you know? So those are
Yeah,
my big things.
that's awesome. All of the accessibility that it provides. It's really good to hear that it's functioning for you very well and accommodating in those ways. That's awesome. Haley, how about yourself?
Yeah, I agree with Kate. I also have learning disabilities, and I've always appreciated how personable and adaptable it is. Um, so because of my learning disabilities, I often struggle to read like single text pages. I often struggle to like not let the words fall into each other. So I can really adapt and change what I'm reading. I can highlight things that are important. I can make my own notes and I can rewrite concepts if I'm having a hard time understanding or grasping the wording in the original explanation of the concept. So I appreciate and prefer the OERs because of the adaptability, and it's just really helped me as a student.
Great. It's always great hearing about all this. Sebastian, why don't we go with you?
Okay, so to kind of back off what the two previous I've said is accessibility is definitely a biggest one. I mean, for me as a student athlete, we do travel a lot during our school season, right? We do get to miss a couple of days of class, and it's something I realized is it's so helpful to not have to carry like 4 or 5 textbooks that weigh a lot and on top of all your luggage and your equipment, right? So just having that just at your disposal on your telephone or computer, like it's just so easy to search. It's clear and it's easy to reference. So as a business student, being able to quickly look up terms, it's super helpful. And at the same time, it saves me a lot of work to have to carry around a book. Instead, I can just carry it around on my phone and just download it, and no problem if I have internet or not. It just works.
Yeah, the portability is a great aspect of it, and especially because it's on multiple platforms. You bring up a really good point. Caterina, how are you feeling about this?
For me, I don't want to like shoot myself in the foot, but like a lot of the textbooks I didn't read or I kind of like skipped or just looked at, like the last summary page. Whereas with OER, I feel like the resources are quite different. They're not always a textbook. Sometimes it's an article or like a short page or a video, and I'm much more likely to engage with that kind of material than I was like at a 500-page textbook. I mean, I run into that a lot less now that I'm in my later years, but definitely during undergrad, there's many textbooks that I have bought and probably only opened once or twice throughout the whole course. So for me, like I just feel like OER is so much easier to engage with, and it kind of motivates me more to engage with those materials rather than the latter. And I also agree with everyone else. It's so much easier to have a textbook that's accessible, that can be read on a screen reader, that I can play in the car. All of that is just one of the benefits and perks of OER.
Yeah, I love this kind of refrain of the multimodality of OER and that ability, and then as well the idea of chunking out information in smaller bites that's easier and more easily consumable for the students as well as the instructor to parse those out as well. Also, Mallory, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to reflect on what my panelists said, I also, what I love most about OER is the accessibility and the flexibility. I really appreciate that the textbooks and the materials are often incorporated directly in Canvas throughout modules. And so they're already in there as I'm going through the learning materials. And then another aspect is that everything is up to date and current, which I really appreciate. And I've found that in the classes where I'm using OER, it also seems like the professor is more knowledgeable about exactly the different chapters of the textbook because they've curated it for a specific class with certain students in mind. So I think it's really cool.
This is so excellent to hear the ways that it's being used as an instructor. We create and design these tools and we use them and implement them, and to see you all reflecting in such positive ways about the impact that it's having on your ability to learn. I'm going to kind of move a little bit ahead because I do think that we've kind of talked about the ways in which OER is kind of supporting your learning capacities, right? In the different ways that it has multiple modalities, as well as just the chunking and accessibility moments. And so I'm interested kind of, and I think a lot of instructors are, and a lot of us that are in library positions or in positions where we are implementing OER, in how you share information about OER with one another. Because it's one thing for me to say, hey, I've got this book, or hey, I've got these tools and resources for you to use that are OER, and I say them in class. There's ways, though, that you all are impacting the kind of dissemination of this knowledge between each other. And so I'm interested in, what are ways that you all are telling other students about OER or engaging with other students in ways that promote or help explain what OER is, so that more folks are tuned in and turned on to it. I'm going to go ahead and go with Sebastian kind of first because you've been near the end, and then we'll again bounce around if that's all right.
I think the main way I kind of share information about OER, obviously being an RA, I have a lot of I I interact with students a lot, right? So I usually tell students during beginning when they're trying to schedule their classes and to look for zero textbook cost, or some classes usually say OER labels. So it uses that textbooks when the registering for classes, since a lot of students just don't know that that's an option. So when I hear people complain about textbook prices, that's when I kind of usually jump in and I'm just like, okay, have you heard about this? Are you aware of this? And what our school does offer, with a majority of classes do support OER. And even with peers back home or peers around the state, that do tell me that, oh yeah, a textbook cost is definitely something that has kind of been a little bit of a barrier for me. I definitely ask around for advisors, for teachers, because I definitely think it's a big movement that a lot of people support, and it just makes it accessible and better for learning without creating a barrier.
That's great. I'll go ahead and we'll go to Caterina. Kind of go backwards a little bit here.
Yeah, there's like two capacities in which I kind of share my knowledge about OER. When I'm talking to my friends, I kind of explain what I do and what they are, and I'm like, oh, it's this really cool thing where, we don't have to pay for textbooks and, it's not embedded into a cost. It's like just free materials. So just word of mouth to like people who are not necessarily in the education system. And then as one of my roles at UNC, I'm creating social media posts, doing tabling, helping get the word out kind of in that way, in a more like academic-ish way, where we're handing out flyers, we're again talking to people, we're posting on social media for students to see, we're reaching out to professors, we're tracking all the different OER courses and teachers using those courses. So just depending on, who I'm talking to, I kind of change my gears a little bit, but I'm definitely talking about it a lot, and I think that's one of the best ways is just word of mouth. Like if you've never heard about it before, you're not going to know what it is, but planting that little OER seed and getting it in people's minds, even if they're not going to go to college is cool because then they can tell somebody else.
Get that word of mouth out. Henry, I'm actually interested if you could just expand a little bit more about what, like, in what capacity, or um, like you say you table, like, is that through a student organization? Is that through a faculty driven kind of incentive? Like, what capacity does that work? Because not everyone that's in the meeting today knows each of the ways that I think our different institutions are approaching trying to send this out. So if you could talk a little bit more about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so in this case for this week, I'm not actually there right now, but in the library at my university library, we have a table set up and it's a s'more OER. So like OER and s'mores. And we have like s'mores treats, a infographic, a giveaway or a raffle, not a giveaway. And we have different instructors who are part of the OER committee standing there at the table and talking to students and teachers, kind of just getting it out there a little bit more. And they do this tabling every year during OER week. So that's kind of how that that goes at my university.
That's great. And is Open Ed Week the main week in which you all are engaging with tabling for OER?
Tabling, yes, I would say that's the main
Yeah.
week for tabling.
Okay. No, that's great. And we're doing the rest of that work word of mouth. Haley, how about yourself? How are you getting the word out?
Yeah, so CSU Pueblo, we're an HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution, and I really love to connect our students, our newer students specifically, with our language department. Many of our departments on campus use OERs, but I'm 99% positive that our entire world languages department is OERs. A lot of students may not have grown up speaking Spanish or German, or they may not have this stronger connection with their second language, and there's been barriers for them. But I tend to tell people, like, okay, but we have great resources for you to be able to connect with your culture again, in a way that you hope to connect with your culture, because we don't have to worry about those extra textbook costs. And sometimes I'll pull up the OERs, from the websites, and I'll show them, like, this is the layout. It's not like Duolingo, it's not like what you may have had in the past. The approach that we have was catered specifically for students like us who were not foreign to these languages, but wanted to reconnect for any reason. And I always try to just really push the affordability of it and the accessibility, um, especially just because textbooks, they can be expensive, and especially when you're learning a new language, some of the textbooks don't feel like they were made to help you learn. But the OERs, they do feel like they were made for us because they were made for us, which is always the best thing to emphasize.
That's really great. I really appreciate the idea of, showing the accessibility of it to, prospective students, and being able to pull that up. It's something that I don't think, personally I've thought about as a way, a means of providing that real instantaneous, here it is, this is what it looks like. And that's really great. I'm glad to hear that you're doing that down there. Kate, how are you engaging with other students?
Well, it's quite hard for me to engage with other students because I'm an online student. And so I more have talked with teachers and given feedback on things that they did that I liked or maybe what I didn't like. I pretty well communicate with my teachers when something doesn't work or it isn't working or like things like that, or suggestions that have worked in the past that I felt that they did that really worked, or something along those lines. So I feel like I have a more open communication with the staff than I do the students. But I also have found that in CMC, I had a hard time figuring out what OER was and which classes had it because there wasn't a lot of, and like it didn't necessarily say it. And so I think that's where CMC could do a little better and pushing that information out there as a school.
Well, and that's really great to hear that, there are ways that we can always improve, especially, when we think about the inability to be in the same space with students or with other folks. How are we communicating those ideas? And I really appreciate that ability, and it's really great that you're able to speak with your professors in such a clear, frank, and kind of, a vulnerable way. That's really great, Kate. And then Mallory, I kind of leaving you last for a reason because we work together, but.
I mean, yes. So I'm part of quite a few different student organizations here on Metro's campus. And so I try to spread the word in all of the organizations I'm in. One of the things that stands out the most is that when I say the words OER, students don't know what I'm talking about. But then when I talk about textbook costs, they have all these strong opinions. And I'm like, okay. So one of the things that I've been trying to do the most is connecting that. When you have free textbooks, that is most often the work of OER, and this is why we should care about it. And then I have had the unique and wonderful opportunity to work with Brian on the initiative to start a student club here at MSU Denver. And it's been really fun. One of the initiatives we're working on right now is an OER ice cream social, which we're having at the end of this week, where we're looking to get student feedback on why OER is important to them, collect different information about affordability, and then be able to bring this back to the university and really create a space where students feel heard and they know that OER does care about their opinion and that we are advocating for something important.
Thanks, Mallory. Yeah, and I'll just really quickly talk about the just privilege of being able to work with students, about talking to other students, with OER, being able to lead this group, to advise this group has been really interesting to hear all of the different ideas and the different ways that we table. Mallory's been really integral in getting us tabled at other events that are going on during the rest of the semester and rest of the year on campus to really get the word out, and is helping, also with MSU does a day of giving to try and support OER for faculty members as well. And I think that data collection as well, even though it might be anecdotal evidence of what's going on, really does give us a strong sense of how we can kind of connect as instructors as well, but also to come up with ways for students to have those conversations with one another and to get really well versed in the kind of verbiage and language that it takes to speak about it. Because I think the idea, and for me as an instructor, is revolutionary, right? Like the first time I hear it is like, why isn't everyone doing this? And I want everyone to do this. And at the same time, we have to sometimes temper that a little bit with, well, we need to talk to our instructors about that fact that it needs to be maybe incremental. Maybe there isn't just a textbook out there. Maybe there are just some tools that I've heard of or used in other classes that might be useful in this one. And you could always go and talk with these folks within the departments, or with our folks that are doing OER. I'm going to shout out Dr. Emily Reagan, myself, Dr. John Dyer, the folks that are in our task force. You can always go to talk to them about finding resources or reaching out about grant initiatives that we've written for. And so, yeah, so thank you very much, Mallory, and all of you for talking about ways that we can share with students. I think, moving forward, I'm interested in, we all have had that. We've all been, everyone that is on this panel right now has been a college student at some point, and we have to make these decisions about, what are we going to take for courses. Now, one of those are, our major asks us to take these. Others are, we have these electives or we have these other courses that we need to fulfill. And I'm interested in your decision-making process and how OER factors in, or impacts that decision-making process on when you're going to choose a course in your curriculum. How do you see that impacting it, and what are the ways that it does impact? And Mallory, I'll let you go to you first since you've been kind of on the end of this.
Yeah, I would say it has a huge impact from the beginning of my college journey. When I didn't even know what major I was strategically choosing classes based off of the designation of low cost, no cost materials. And that's purely because most classes, similar to how Caterina shared, that require a textbook, I probably won't buy it. If I have to buy a $200 textbook that I'm going to read just a few chapters out of, I will have to make the decision, unfortunately, to save my money. And so it was really amazing to be in these classes where I have access from day one. I feel like I'm on the same level playing field as other people. And even just the signal that my professors care about equity and open educational resources as a whole was really amazing to me. And it continues to impact the course decisions that I make even now in my senior year. Through elective courses and things like that, I strategically look for low cost, no cost materials to this day.
That's great to hear that it's having such an impact. I'm going to go ahead and go up to Caterina just because she's above you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I'm probably still paying student loans on textbooks from my undergrad that are accruing a lot of interest. So, having OER, I mean, my upper degrees, my master and my doctorate, I think I only had to buy two textbooks. Um, I also am someone who strategically finds those textbooks online, but um it's definitely impacted my life. I mean, from having to pay for textbooks and still paying off those textbooks to not having to pay makes a huge difference for myself financially. And I know those teachers are keeping up to date that do use OER. It does signal a lot for me as well. Like they care about their students. Not that people who use textbooks don't care, but um thinking about your students' financial situations really helps relieve some of that burden and makes the class more enjoyable, and it's easier for you to learn when you're not having that additional burden of financial insecurity around the class. So as a student, I really, really appreciate when I don't have to go out and pay a couple $100s for textbook, even $60, $70. I mean, that's dinner. Um, or even lunch these days, but it really makes a difference for my mental health. And in addition, I feel like the materials are much better because the teachers have that control over the materials. They tend to be more equitable and have a better frame, meaning like we're an HSI designated school as well. So like a lot of the materials will consider ethnicity and race when you're talking about a certain topic, or consider, the DEI efforts that might be related to those materials. And those materials to me are just a bit more holistic, whereas with textbooks, you tend to kind of miss out on that because textbooks take a lot of time to create and they kind of maybe in a couple of years they'll be caught up on those materials, but why wait a couple of years when you can have that information, those journal articles, those videos right now instead?
Yeah, I appreciate that understanding of the nimble nature of OER and how quickly we can make those changes if it's available, and instructors being able to, again, just make diversity, equity, and inclusion part of their day-to-day lesson plan when it's applicable. That's really great. And also, again, will not talk about other ways to get textbooks. And we know that you all are trying to do whatever you can to find them because you do want to be great students, and you want to be with the class. And if it's cost prohibitive, again, that becomes just another roadblock that we're putting in your way to access an education that should be as free as possible for you all. That's great. Thank you very much, Caterina. Sebastian, I would enjoy hearing what you have to.
So when I get asked if OER impacts my course choices, honestly, my answer is yes. Uh, I've been very fortunate here at Colorado Northwestern with almost like every single class that's offered here has been provided an OER. And like every class has an OER to it. So you kind of don't have a choice to not take an OER class, but that might be for the better for everyone. But and as I transition to my 4 year school, yes, if I'm choosing between two sections and one requires an $180 textbook and one doesn't, that definitely factors into my decision. Saving those like savings add up fast, especially as a full-time student. And to add a little bit to what Katerina said, my experience with OER textbooks kind of, you don't really skip a chapter. Everything the textbook has is incorporated into the course. And while I have taken some concurrent enrollment classes in the past where we use a textbook, and you tend to skip a lot of chapters because they're simply just not incorporated into that class. When your OER is basically, you're creating a textbook that all of its content is going to be used in that class. So that's something I do am very grateful for, and makes it a lot easier to have that textbook because you're going to use all of it, not pieces and whatever you need from it.
I can completely understand the customizability of OER. As a public speaking teacher and a presentational speaking teacher, I have historically from grad school until now would get these textbooks that we would never follow from chapter 1 to chapter 20, and we'd have to jump around, and that has to be confusing and frustrating for students when they have to experience it. It's frustrating for an instructor, let alone like then forcing that on other students. So it's great to know that customizability is there, as well as again kind of reiterating the cost prohibitiveness of being charged so much, such an exponential amount. We'll go to Kate and then down to Haylee.
So this doesn't necessarily impact my decision to pick a class, especially since I have a hard time figuring out which ones are OER. But it does impact whether I choose to stay in that class because whenever I apply or my brain is not working with words. Whenever I sign up for classes, I always sign up for more than I need just in case. And I usually find that the classes that I end up dropping are the classes that require paid textbooks and the when I compare the textbooks to the class course and I feel like they don't match up quite right, or I feel like it's just going to be a really frustrating class because I'm going to be sitting there jumping back and forth and I'm not going to do well, then I'll end up dropping that class compared to a class that I don't have to pay for the textbook. And, I can see that this class goes in order of chapters, and you can see that it more correlates. It seems less confusing, and the links work. But when the links don't work, that always gets on my nerves. But that's usually my decision for whether or not I am going to keep or drop the class before it even starts.
And I appreciate that idea that cost isn't always just monetary, right? Like capital comes in multiple forms, and one of those is time and energy for you, and it has to take up a lot of, time for you to look up courses and to make those decisions about what you're doing. And, another impediment, again, another roadblock for just having easing that. And then if that's occurring with you, how many other students are experiencing this to the point where I can't find a course that really matches up? And so do I want to stay with an institution, or do I want to stay with even this process of higher learning? And so, that's something we really need to consider. I appreciate that perspective. Haylee, how about yourself?
I would say that OER very much impacts my decisions about what courses I choose and what courses I stay in. This semester, I had enrolled in a course and I was excited, I was like, new semester, yay. But because my university has adapted a new textbook program, it kind of impacted our ability to access these OER grants. So this class used to have an OER, and then I went to take it this semester, and they wanted me to pay a few $100s for a virtual textbook that I would have lost access to once the semester was over. And the reality is that I can't really afford to do that, especially when it's temporary access. If I have like a law book for a law class, I'll buy those because I can see myself using them later in my education. But I just, it felt really frustrating because I knew that this class, when I signed up for it, I knew the class had an OER, but it suddenly became an obstacle for me to be able to be in the class, and I ended up dropping the class because of the textbook issue. So I would say that the availability to OER is just extremely impactful on my decision with classes.
Well, and it is saddening to hear from both you and Katie the want to take these courses and the hope that you can be part of this educational experience, and to have that kind of denied because of just the inability to access the simple tool that it takes, right? Like it's must be very frustrating, and I can hear that. And again, I think you point to one of those things too that I think, for a lot of us that did not have electronic, we had PDFs and things like that, but like would buy books, you always take a book with you, right? And like for me, especially if it's, integral to my discipline, of course I want to take it with me. And having to pay hundreds of dollars to just have semesters long access to that information. I mean, the extra work that you would have to do to retain any of that, is astronomical in its capacity for you to do work, your homework and all of the other stuff on top of then trying to retain that information. I really appreciate you all being very candid about your experience with this for us, because it is a part of the work that we're doing to just really try and understand how is it impacting. And we're most of us that are teachers are using it if we're in this meeting, and we're glad to know that you're choosing our courses because of that, also because we're great instructors. I'm just going to smile really quickly and be a little braggadocious. Also, so in that you are choosing these OER courses, what I'm really interested in as a faculty member is, and I think a lot of our institutions are, what are some things that we could do when using OER to make this experience more robust? Or what are some of the things that you would like to see us do if we could? And this is kind of, you can be as far out as you want with this, but really, this is for me a really great moment to learn what I might not be aware of, right? There's a lot of things I can be blind to when I'm implementing OER. And I'm going to go ahead and go up to Caterina, and we'll start with you if that's all right.
Yeah. I'm kind of biased a little bit because I'm also a teacher who uses OER, but some things that I like to do is really diversify my materials so my students aren't always just having to read a couple pages. Like there are different um, modalities in which they're learning. Sometimes it's a YouTube video, which may not be completely OER, but it's still free to access. And um, So definitely diversifying the materials. And then also something I like to do is when students do their introductions, like most classes, there's an introductions discussion on the first day. I like to kind of take note of who my students are. So if I have like a large population of, for example, nursing students this semester, and I teach lifespan development, I like to connect my OER resources to the nursing field a little bit. So it kind of sticks with them a little bit better and it kind of piques their interest even more. So like tailoring your OER, not completely, because it's hard to do that every semester with all materials and all modules, but even spending a little time with one module and making it connect for students a little bit better helps retain that information and really helps engagement a lot.
That's great. That tailoring of information to specific student groups sounds like a really great tool, and I'm stoked to hear that you're using that as one of those principles for your OER. Haylee, what would you like to let us?
Sorry, I had to get myself unmuted. And my university specifically, I wish that they would listen to the students. For us, that program has really been a pain. I think it was mentioned in the chat, but the CSU Pueblo, we began the Pack Ready program and it charges $25 per credit for the class. So that's about $75 per class. And that's to have all of our textbooks ready and prepared for us to pick up from the bookstore. But for a student in the Chask College, such as myself, they're unnecessary charges and they create additional barriers for our learning. Um, most of our professors utilize OERs whenever they can, and they continue to despite the new program because they want us to be able to opt out and not have to spend that extra money because many of us are here on scholarships or grant money or loans. So many of us are still opting out to try and save our money despite the program coming in. It's only on its second semester, I believe. But many of us are just very displeased with the lack of consideration from an institution that targets first generation students. It kind of feels like they're taking advantage of us not having a familiarity with the higher education environment. And most of us just kind of preferred the system before Pack Ready. The bookstore will recommend books for the Pack Ready program, and it'll be like, this is the price of this book, but it's included in your fee, don't worry. And then I can find the textbook used for like 20 bucks online. And it's just extremely unnecessary because, again, like that program created issues with getting access to grants. So we're losing some of our OERs. And a lot of us are pushing, but I wish that the administration here at CSUP would really listen to us.
Can I ask just kind of a follow-up? What type of what type of movement do you see that you all are working with? Is it mainly students just talking directly to faculty? Have a group of you kind of gotten together to try and do some sort of just student-based advocacy for yourselves? How do you see that shaping up?
We haven't been able to quite organize quite yet. It is just the second semester, but I see the students kind of organizing to create an opportunity for us to advocate for ourselves against this program. I know many of us will speak with our professors and will be like, hey, I need your help opting out of the program because for some reason it feels like I'm breaking a rule trying to opt out because I have to go through 3 different links. So I know that the faculty is voicing their concerns for us. Many of them are very aware of who their students are. They're very aware of our accessibility and what we can afford. So I don't see this program sticking around for very long.
Well, I'm glad to hear that there people are listening as well as that students are voicing their opinion and feel free to do that on your campus. Again, if there's any ways that any of us can help, that's what we do. As a first generation student, I can identify with going to a community college that was based in first gen folks, and we didn't have this opportunity. So it's great to know that you're there as well, doing that work. All right, and we have. I don't know why I muted myself. I'm going to hit Mallory, and then we'll go to Sebastian and Kate. We'll end with you.
Yeah, I agree with Haley's sentiment that conversation has been a huge point of uh, just getting the word out there, and I think a great way to keep the momentum going. And one of the things I've been thinking about is just normalizing conversations about textbook affordability and open education resources at like during advising appointments and throughout faculty departments, because through tabling and being part of OER Student Club, the more that I talk to students, the more that I realize that this is a huge issue and for more students than even I thought. And then I think that talking about the way that this affordability and the OER courses help students will continue to be impactful. I also think that just hearing about the other panelists, like having clearly labeled OER and no cost, low cost materials throughout my registration system is so helpful. And I know that at other institutions would probably be extremely helpful as well.
Yeah, so thinking about the ways that MSU has been, and I don't know what other institutions are doing, but working hard to get that course demarcation of at least low cost, no cost materials, and really trying to push for OER to fulfill those as well. Yeah, it wasn't easy, and it's not an easy process because we have to have people to do that. But to let us know that, like, as faculty members, we should be doing that, right? Awesome, thank you, Mallory. Sebastian.
So a lot of things current faculty and teachers at my college have done that I really like and I want to see be implemented more is sometimes OER can be seen as a replacement textbook instead of a supplement. But it becomes like when OER becomes the most powerful, I believe, is when professors actively references in lectures, assignments, and discussions. That's when I felt like the students in my class have felt like this is not only a replacement, but it's more of something that should be more available across education. Another idea I think is being more transparent with students about why they choose OER. If a professor says I choose this to save you $150 and make sure everyone has access on day one, that kind of builds more, it's more personal connection between OER and the professors with the student instead of it's just I'm a teacher and you're a student, right? And I also think institutions could collect and share real data. I think data and facts, obviously, I am a business student, so we do a lot of with numbers and that. And it's hard to prove numbers wrong. It's hard to prove data wrong. And when you are seeing that how much this is impacting generations, it's hard to go against it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's great to really kind of reveal, like make it very transparent about what's going on, right? So when we go to Congress and try to get the OER grants re-upped, right, we find out that I think the ROI is something like 14 to 1 investment wise. And it seems like from a business aspect, I think you're saying, Sebastian, like it seems like what would be considered like a no-brainer kind of idea to want to perpetuate this. And there are other, impediments that might be in the way of being able to do it again, availability of supplemental text. But also, I do appreciate that the way that you talk about, maintaining a community on your campus, right? Like the idea that this then becomes a connection between not only yourself and other students, but yourself and faculty members, in this kind of collaborative process of learning instead of maybe a top-down, banking model of information. So it's a pedagogical approach as well. Kate.
Could you ask me the original question again, real
Yeah,
quick?
no problem. We're just kind of interested in ways that faculty, staff, or librarians could make a more robust, like use OER in more robust ways, or other things that we could do to like, be inclusive with OER, or just whatever your thoughts are about making it a better process, maybe.
Okay, perfect. That's what I thought, but my brain went off track. So, I was thinking about ways that we could on to online students kind of share OER a little more, and I think a great opportunity this like modules and the information that the teachers put in the front would be a great spot for them to explain a little bit about the OER program and how their modules and texts and the things that they've picked out kind of relate to it. I also really like it when teachers put in multimedia things. So videos, text, activities are really helpful in kind of expanding, and it also helps your brain not blur all the information together because you'll be able to remember was visually a thing that stood out. So those are the things that I think could be improved upon or that some teachers are already doing that I really appreciate.
It's great to hear all of the different ways that you see OER being used, as well as some of the ideas that we can have to spread across institutional platforms to get people engaged. I think is the last kind of question is, what do you think that we can do to help other students as faculty members, as librarians? And we've kind of talked about this, and I think this might be probably the kind of closing moments of the panel for today. What do you think we can do to help y'all get excited about OER? What can we implement within our classrooms or our practices that might help, not just engage students, but like, get you all kind of going? And I'll start with, we'll go with Haylee.
I think we should discuss, our professors should discuss the benefits of no cost textbooks more, but I mean, everybody loves no additional charges. Higher education is expensive. None of us are new to that. But it ensures that we can learn without, worrying about these textbooks, having to compare prices and, just go through the whole vetting process of seeing the most affordable way to participate in the class. But I also think it's really beneficial if they share their motives for using OERs. I spoke with Dr. Alegria, and when she told me that she had spent almost a decade creating the OERs that we use in our language department, I saw the dedication, but then she told me that she did it because she didn't want students to have to pay to reconnect with their language and their culture. She told me that she created these OERs because we're not foreign to this language, and most language textbooks are built for people who've never seen these languages before. But in her words, and this quote may stay with me forever, Spanish is not foreign to her students. Spanish is the language of our abuelas. And for me, it has been a language barrier between me and my abuela. So I really appreciated hearing that. It instilled a lot of hope in me, and it made me feel really seen by my professors. So when they tell us like why they did what they did to access these OERs or create these OERs, we as students, we don't feel as overlooked as we maybe do in other aspects of higher education.
That's a beautiful and inspiring quote, and just the idea of being seen on a campus and the ability for OER to be doing that. That's really great. Thank you very much, Haylee, for sharing that moment. Kate.
I think it would be good to share the main benefits of it, the lower cost, the accessibility, the connections to students, and by sharing that kind of more, I didn't know a lot about it, and so hearing about all these other things that I didn't even think about makes me more excited and passionate about it. And so especially the school I go to, I wish they would have shared it more, and I'd be more excited to take those classes, and I may want to support those teachers more because they're really thinking about all of the things that can help me as a student thrive in the tough college environment. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Again, kind of that resonating board, right? That amplification of it. That's great. Yeah. Sebastian.
So obviously there's the talking about money and success, and students care about both. So if you show that OER saves money and helps students start prepared on day one, that's exciting, but something that might not be talked about as much is the involvement in students in like reviewing or giving feedback on OER materials. Like even a short survey at the end of the semester asking what worked or what didn't work would make students feel like partners in the process. Since when you sell a student more of a vision towards something and that they can be engaged and have an opinion and kind of shape it, that kind of excites everyone because you want to contribute, right? So just that vision that you could sell to us students, I think is what gets us excited.
I think again, highlighting that idea of collaboration between teacher and student, instructor and student, professor and student becomes really interesting, especially when we think about the possibilities of OER as spaces for scholarship for students, and also bringing students into the review process. I think that that is something that might be a little overlooked for us because we always think of ourselves as a content expert, and if you're not being seen in the course. This will help us to diversify and create equitable spaces and inclusivity. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Caterina.
I always get a little excited when I'm like reviewing the syllabus and it's like free materials or no textbook needed or any of that. So as a student, which I'm not going to be for that much longer, it's just nice to know that it's there and it's like openly advertised. As a teacher, I always send an email about a week before the class and I try to make it really exciting, like no textbooks needed, don't worry about it. Like just come to class with yourself and that's enough. And I try to kind of like pump it up a little bit to make it a little bit more exciting. But I'm also very grateful because my university definitely pushes OER and really supports our instructors for that. And so that does make it a bit easier. I feel like most of our students, myself included, are fairly aware about OER and are fairly aware about the cost reducing and can look on our when we're registering to see what the cost is for the class.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate both perspectives. Thank you so much. And then Mallory, we'll go ahead and probably close out with you today.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about just what I've seen students get excited about so far, which is sharing real numbers, talking about how much money students have saved collectively. I also think that personal stories, like just talking one on one with a student, or even featuring personal stories about how OER has impacted students. And then I'm really excited to see how hosting campus events like panels like this, and then some of the events that the OER Student Club is going to be putting on will help connect students to OER resources. And then one of the last things I think that has really drawn me to want to be a part of the student club and to do things like this is framing OER as a larger equity and innovation movement, where we're really giving students access and removing barriers. And to me, it shows me that my institution cares about that.
That's very nice. Thanks, Mallory. Um, so I want to say thank you very much. I think we are like almost exactly at time. You all are amazing folks for coming here today, and I really appreciate the insight, the transparency and clarity, as well as just the vulnerability to talk about your actual experiences on campus with us today. It's been just a great experience, and I hope all of you very well. I think Chelsea, I think we are right on time. And so once again, thank you so much for coming out. I really wish we could all give you a round of applause for just taking time out of your day to be with us. And you will never know how exponentially important this is for all of us as instructors and people trying to do OER work. So thank you very much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And Chelsea, if you have other things to say, please do.
Thank you to our speakers. You represent so many experiences of an average Colorado student of five different distinct institutions that are both new to OER and also leaders, being athletes and parents and hardworking students among all of you. It's been inspiring. It's been inspiring to hear from you, and also has given us some to-dos of things we can address and improve upon. So thank you so much. And thank you for all our attendees for spending part of your open education week with us all.